Hello, Axis and Allies fans. I'm going to start with a little bit of a disclaimer. We still do not have our hard drive back, and unfortunately, the first two sections of the Mexican-American War are on it. I decided to post the rest anyways, because we're still recording scenarios, and if we don't put out something where it's been months, and two, we're gonna have a backlog of videos. So unfortunately, the first two parts of the Mexican-American War will be absent, but not a whole lot happened those first two turns because more or less everyone was still building up and moving to attack each other. Apologize for that, but without further ado, this is the Mexican-American War. So the roots of this conflict go back to the War for Texas independence and Santa Anna being forced to sign the treaty that recognized Texas independence while he was a prisoner of the Texan rebels. Due to this, the Mexican government never recognized the legitimacy of the treaty and considered Texas as still part of Mexico. While the Mexican government claimed ownership of Texas, the Texans functioned as a completely independent state with no interference from the Mexican government. Tensions flared between Mexico and the United States in 1845 when the United States finally accepted Texas's decade-long request to be admitted to the United States as its newest state. Mexico protested the annexation of a province that they still considered as their territory. The United States sent troops to the disputed territory, hoping to provoke Mexico into attacking the U.S. forces and painting Mexico as the aggressor. Whether or not Mexico actually fired the first shot is disputed, but in the end it didn't matter. The United States had their justification for war. While the conflict was fought across the western frontier, the main theater of the conflict was in northeastern Mexico and Mexico City itself. The major battles of the north ended in close victories for the United States, with one almost ending in defeat. The battles for Mexico City, however, were crushing defeats for Mexico, where the majority of American strength was focused, unlike the northern campaigns. This southern campaign started with the first large-scale amphibious invasion in United States history. The battles of Veracruz, Cerro Gordo, Contreras, Churubusco, Molino del Rey, and Chapultepec all ended in American victory. This, coupled with the defeats in the Western Theater, forced Mexico to surrender in 1848. The terms of the peace were devastating for Mexico, who lost half its total territory, all of which would prove to be the most industrious and rich regions that Mexico had. The United States, by contrast, almost doubled in size and stretched its borders from coast to coast. This victory would open the door to allow the United States to not only become one of the largest nations on the planet, but in less than a century become the most powerful nation to ever exist. Welcome back, Axis and Allies players. This is NATO and the CIC, and we are in the spring of 1847, so this is the end of the second turn / beginning of the third turn, and the only battles were Texas once again, and then over here in the plains. This, same as last turn, everyone whiffed it, no one hit anything. Over here in Texas, the United States got a hit on Mexico. Mexico got zilch. And the United States is definitely showing that they are gearing up for an amphibious operation somewhere. They have now put down 4 transports. Where that's going to go exactly, who knows. Given the time constraints, it's either going to, because they only got 3 turns so left in the game, so it's, given the time constraints, it can only be Texas or eastern Mexico. It doesn't have enough time to go all the way down and around South America to land somewhere on the west coast. The Panama Canal has not been built yet, so get to the other side of the continent, they have to go all the way around South America. And only 3 turns left, there just isn't enough time for that, so the only places it could land is Texas or eastern Mexico. The United States splitting off its cavalry from its cannon, utilizing that ability to not its cannon being able to move independently of the cavalry. Whether that cavalry is going to Texas or over to the West Coast, who knows? Mexico just continuing to reinforce Texas to try to, well, the prospects of them taking Texas and then breaking through into the American heartland is next to zero, but continuing to reinforce Texas to keep the front line alive. Although with this growing threat of an amphibious operation, Mexico might have to pull back from Texas to keep its capital safe. But we'll see in the next couple turns where that landing force is going. So we'll come back at the end of this turn, and for the end of spring 1847 and beginning of fall 1847. See you then. Welcome back, Axis and Allies players. This is NATO and the CIC, and we are at the beginning of the fall of 1847. So we just finished the third round of the game, and as you can see, the American production advantage is starting to make itself felt. There's a lot of blue on the board. But once again, the two battlegrounds are Texas and then the Great Plains on the west coast. Mexico attacked the American units in Texas and actually got a decisive win on it. They took down two American units for no loss of their own. But then the United States counterattacked and it was a draw. Both lost a unit, but more importantly is the United States has taken the Great Plains. Now that opens the door for the United States to move in either into California or western Mexico itself. And with more reinforcements coming in, what the United States has done is it's basically detached its cavalry and is just sending its cavalry out west, and the infantry and cannon it's sending south into Texas, using that advantage of being able to move its cannon without cavalry. And then, as you saw, the United States has definitely launched an amphibious invasion. Next turn is going to land either in Texas or eastern Mexico. My money being on eastern Mexico, going straight for the capital. But there's 2 rounds left, so if it ended right now, Mexico would be the victor, because the United States has only gotten one of its point, a point for taking the Great Plains, I believe. We might have a point for keeping Texas, but either way, if the game were to end right now, Mexico would win. So in these next 2 turns, the United States has to rack up some points. Otherwise, we're going to have a very different United States going forward. So looking forward to it. We'll come back at the end of the round and see how it's going. See you then. Welcome back, Axis and Allies players. We're This is NATO and the CIC, and we are in the spring of 1848 and the last round of the war. And right now it is dead even. I double checked the points, and it is the United States has 3, Mexico has 3. So this last turn, so right now it's a draw. So this last turn will decide the whole thing. United States has a point for Texas, the Great Plains, and Southern California, and then Mexico has points for everything else. So Mexico's not going to get Texas. That's a given, because this is what Mexico has in Texas. One of each, 1 infantry, 1 cavalry, 1 cannon. And this is what the United States has in Texas. So even if Mexico got a perfect roll and all 3 of those hit, it wouldn't even dent the militia the United States has there. So and with the rest of Mexico's mobile units bottled up defending the capital due to the United States making an amphibious landing in eastern Mexico, threatening the capital, it all comes down to if the United States can take a territory somewhere, whether it be eastern Mexico or somewhere back east in California or western Mexico. It all comes down to that. Speaking of the amphibious landing, which in our real world was the first large-scale amphibious operation in U.S. history, was the U.S.-Mexican War, where they landed in eastern Mexico and marched on Mexico City. No different here. This is the only other amphibious operation that the United States has done in our Colonial War series is the Barbary Pirates, and that was just 1 Marine. So this time the United States landed with substantially more stuff, but the landings didn't go quite as well as they hoped for. This was what's left of the landing force. They landed with 3 infantry and 3 cannon, and when it was all said and done, the United States had 1 infantry and 2 cannon left. Mexico lost 2 units, a militia and a infantry. So Mexico lost 2, the United States lost 3, but so we'll see what happens this last turn, whether or not Mexico is going to pull its forces from Texas back, because they're not going to take Texas, but if they keep them there, they at least keep all the American mobile units in Texas. If they pull out Texas, then all this can, then march on Mexico City and join up with the forces it landed last turn. So who knows what will happen. So we'll come back with the last turn and see who wins this. See you then. Welcome back, Axis and Allies players. This is NATO and CSE, and we are at the conclusion of the U.S.-Mexican War, and it ended in a draw. The United States has 3 points, Mexico has 3 points. Now, historically, in the event of a draw, the victor goes to whoever historically won the battle, or won the war, so it's a technical U.S. victory, but it ended in a draw. I think the key thing that allowed Mexico to hold on was that landing that the United States did that went poorly for the United States. lost too many units in the landing, didn't kill enough Mexican units. So when the final battle for Mexico City happened, Mexico had enough manpower to weather the storm. And it turned out prudent because the last attack on Mexico City, it hurt Mexico badly. They lost over half their army. If you remember what that stack looked like a couple minutes ago, that was a lot bigger. Over here in the west, the United States attacked Northern California, and they missed it by 1. They reduced it down to 1 militia. If they would have just got 1 more hit, it would have clinched a secured U.S. victory at 4-2. But they missed it by 1, so it ended in a draw, 3-3. But like I said, in an event of a draw, the victor goes to whoever won it historically, if there was a historical victor. The American War of 1812 historically ended in a draw, so that if that ends in a draw, then it just stays at a draw. But this, because historically the United States won this, it'll go to the United States as a technical victory. So unfortunately, that means Mexico will lose half its territory and just kind of disappear from the history books till World War I. What that means for the United States is it's doubled in size again. And it'll now stretch from coast to coast. And that will lead us into the next series of conflicts. This next scenario will be a much larger one than the ones we've been doing the last 3 or so wars. Not necessarily in terms of numbers, it'll still be relatively small, at least compared to the Napoleonic conflicts, but it'll be large in the sense that there'll be 5 different wars going on at one point or another across the globe. So, it's 1848 right now. So in 2 years, China will fall into a civil war. It's called the Taiping Rebellion of 1850. And then in the middle of that, the Second Opium War will happen. So there's 2 wars going on right there. And then 1861, the American Civil War will happen. And then also sprinkled in during that same time, the Second Franco-Mexican War will happen. And then also during while all that's going on, the Crimean War will happen. So it'll be pretty busy. Because the Taiping Rebellion, that goes from 1850 to 1864. So that will pretty much cover the other 4 wars, the American Civil War, the Crimean War, the Second Opium War, and the Second Franco-Mexican War will happen while the Taiping Rebellion is going on in the background. So get to do a conflict that's a little bigger and get to use more of the map again than just basically this corner. So we'll clear the board and get the required overlays out, and we'll set up for the Taiping Rebellion and everything else going on during it. So see you then.